I became a billionaire to destroy my sister's adoptive family. The last time I saw my sister Daisy truly smile, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and lit up the whole dreary room, was the day she was adopted. She was 7. I was 9. For the next 20 years, I watched from the sidelines, first through letters, then through the lens of private investigators, as the family that promised to love her systematically snuffed out that light. They were the Maxwells, a name that tasted like old money and bitter ash. They bought her like a prize pony, they broke her spirit like a cheap toy, and when she was no longer of use, they tried to throw her away. But they made one massive, catastrophic mistake. In their arrogance, they forgot about me, the quiet, scrawny girl with the watchful eyes they'd left behind. And I've spent the last 2 decades and every cent of a multi-billion-dollar fortune architecting a symphony of destruction to ensure that's a mistake they'll regret every single day for the rest of their miserable lives. It all started in the quiet, sterile, soul-crushing halls of a state orphanage, a place that smelled of bleach and quiet desperation. In that world, Daisy and I were everything to each other. She was the sun, I was the planet that orbited her. We were the only constant in a universe of revolving door caseworkers and lumpy cots. I'll never forget the day we were called into Mrs. Gable's office, the head of the adoption agency. Our hands were clammy, our hearts beating a frantic rhythm against our ribs. There were 2 families. First, the Maxwells, Arthur and Eleanor Maxwell. He was a statue in a bespoke suit. She was a mannequin draped in silk and disdain. The name itself just dripped with money and unearned status. Then there were the Pattersons, Mark and Sarah. He was a mechanic with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands. She was a night shift cleaner at a local hospital. They didn't have much, but their smiles felt real, warm. Daisy, with her big, innocent eyes and a trusting soul that had somehow survived our childhood, was instantly mesmerized by the hypnotic glint of Mrs. Maxwell's pearl necklace. The Maxwells had made it clear they only wanted one child, a girl, a pretty little thing to accessorize their perfect family portrait. Me? I was too quiet, too intense. I felt a gravitational pull toward the Pattersons. Their hands were calloused, but their eyes held a kindness I was starving for. The choice was made before we even left the room. Just like that, a lifetime of shared whispers and pinky promises was severed by the stroke of a pen. They told us it was for the best, that Daisy would have opportunities I could only dream of. We promised we'd write every week, that we'd see each other on holidays, that we'd never, ever lose touch. We were kids. We actually believed them. For the first few years, the letters came, written on heavy, cream-colored stationery with a gold M embossed at the top. Daisy wrote about a house so big you could get lost in it, about piano lessons from a stern European tutor, about silk dresses she was terrified to stain. But the words felt hollow, like a script she'd been forced to memorize. Her bubbly, joyful handwriting grew rigid and tight. There was none of her old spirit in them. My life couldn't have been more different. My new parents, the Pattersons, gave me everything that actually mattered: unconditional love, unwavering stability, and the rock-solid belief that I could do anything if I worked for it. Dad taught me how to rebuild a carburetor and how to stand up for myself. Mom taught me the quiet dignity of hard work and the power of a budget. They saw the fire in me, the fierce intelligence, and they fanned the flames. They taught me how to be tough, how to be resilient. The Maxwells taught Daisy she was a prop. Her straight-A report cards weren't a cause for celebration. They were just something for Arthur to brag about at the country club. Her flawless piano recitals were not a testament to her talent, but command performances to impress their vapid friends. She wasn't a daughter. She was a high-end accessory, a living testament to their supposed generosity. Their biological son, Richard, a spoiled, cruel boy 2 years older, reinforced this every day. He treated her like she was his personal servant. He'd break her dolls and then tell his parents she'd been careless. He'd steal her allowance and then laugh when she cried. The Maxwells always took his side. Daisy was the outsider, the little charity case, a fact they never let her forget. Then, when she was 16, the letters stopped. Just silence. I was frantic. I called the number I had, but it was disconnected. My parents drove me to their last known address, a sprawling mansion in the city's most exclusive suburb, only to find a for sale sign on the lawn. The Maxwells had moved. No forwarding address. It was like Daisy had just vanished off the face of the earth. It took me 2 years and my entire savings from my after school job to hire a cut rate private investigator to find out the real reason she disappeared. The truth was colder and more vicious than anything I could have imagined. One rainy October night, Richard, drunk and high on his own arrogance, was speeding in his brand new graduation present sports car. Daisy was in the passenger seat. He lost control, plowing into a man on his way home from a late shift, crippling him for life. Richard didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. To protect their precious son from the consequences of his actions, the Maxwells mobilized their entire fortune and their vast network of influence. They hired a team of morally bankrupt lawyers, not to find justice, but to bury the truth under a mountain of lies. They painted Daisy, who didn't even have her driver's license yet, as the one behind the wheel. They crafted a narrative for the police and the press, portraying her as a troubled, rebellious teenager who stole the car for a joyride. They paid off the victim with a sum that felt more like an insult than a settlement, buying his silence and his medical care. And then, to make sure the lie stuck, to completely sever her from her past and anyone who might believe her, they shipped Daisy off to a disciplinary boarding school in another state, a remote, brutal place designed to break spirits and erase identities. That was the day the sister I knew was truly gone, erased. And that was the day I made a vow, a silent, burning promise to the universe. I wouldn't just find Daisy. I wouldn't just bring her home. I would tear the Maxwell dynasty down, brick by gilded brick, until they were left with nothing but the rubble of their miserable lives. That vow became the core of my existence. For 20 years, I lived two lives. To the world, I was Ivy Patterson, a quiet, intensely driven student on a full scholarship for economics and computer science. My adoptive parents were so proud of my relentless ambition, never knowing the dark, cold fury that fueled it. While other kids were at parties, I was in the library, a ghost haunting the stacks, devouring books on corporate finance, market strategy, hostile takeovers, and contract law. I wasn't studying for a degree, I was studying for war. I was forging my weapons. My first job out of college was at a small, soul-crushingly boring investment firm. It was a sea of gray suits and gray ambition, but it was the perfect place to learn. I learned the rhythm of the market, how to hear the faint whispers of a merger before it was announced, and the nasty little art of leveraging debt. I lived like a monk, saving every single penny, my apartment bare, my diet consisting of ramen and rage. My first big move was sinking my entire life savings into a tiny, floundering tech startup that was developing a revolutionary data compression algorithm. Everyone said I was insane. 6 months later, it was bought out by a Silicon Valley giant, and my investment exploded by a factor of 1,000. That was the seed money, my war chest. From there, I started building. I moved into venture capital, my methods surgical and ruthless. My name, always buried under layers of shell corporations and proxies, became a whispered legend in the back rooms of high finance. They said I had a sixth sense, that I could see the future of the market. They were wrong. My choices were never random. Every single investment, every acquisition, every calculated risk was a strategic step toward one singular goal: the absolute annihilation of the Maxwells. As my fortune grew from millions to billions, I began to weave my web. I hired the best private investigators in the world: ex-Mossad agents, disgraced FBI analysts, forensic accountants who could make numbers sing, to build a file on the entire Maxwell family. It was my Bible. I knew every asset, every offshore account, every dirty secret, every hidden weakness. I learned that their family company, Maxwell Industries, a manufacturer of luxury home goods, was an empire built on a shaky foundation of debt and brand arrogance. I learned about Arthur Maxwell's secret gambling trips to Macau and the seven-figure debt he owed to some very unsavory characters. I learned about Eleanor Maxwell's desperate obsession with her social standing and the petty cruelty she inflicted to maintain it. I learned exactly where to push, where to cut, and where to twist the knife to make it all fall down. Then, I started planting the seeds of their destruction. The first phase was financial. I began by anonymously buying up the debt of their main suppliers through a labyrinth of shell companies based in Panama and the Cayman Islands. I became their biggest, quietest creditor. They had no idea the financial lifeline keeping their factories running was in the hand of the girl they discarded years ago. Next, I went after their social standing, Eleanor's most prized possession. She was the chairwoman of the prestigious National Children's Charity Foundation, a position she loved to flaunt like a new diamond bracelet. So I became the foundation's largest anonymous donor. My checks, wired from a Geneva bank account, dwarfed hers. With that money came influence. I quietly placed my own people, sharp, discreet lawyers and accountants, onto the board. And then I just waited. Vengeance, I'd learned, is a dish best served cold. Mine had been on ice for 20 years. It was about to be served. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday morning. With a single encrypted email sent from a laptop in a nondescript office I owned in Zurich, I gave the order. My holding companies called in all the outstanding debts from Maxwell Industries suppliers. Simultaneously, the effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. It was a corporate heart attack. Their supply chain was severed at the neck. Production lines screeched to a halt. Their stock, which had been coasting on legacy and reputation, began to plummet. Mr. Maxwell, arrogant and insulated as ever, tried to secure emergency loans, but every bank and financial institution he turned to mysteriously denied him. He had no idea I'd spent the last 5 years building relationships with those very same banks, becoming a far more valuable client than he ever was. As his company teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, one of my shell corporations, Phoenix Capital, launched a hostile takeover bid. I offered pennies on the dollar for a controlling stake. It was a brutal, humiliating, public slap in the face, but it was their only offer. Their board, facing total collapse and shareholder lawsuits, had no choice. Within a week, the company that had been in their family for 3 generations belonged to me. The next domino was their social life. The annual charity gala for the National Children's Charity Foundation, the absolute pinnacle of Eleanor Maxwell's year, was the stage I chose for her public execution. She took the stage in a glittering gown, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight, ready to deliver her self-congratulatory opening speech. Just as she cleared her throat, a board member, one of my people, politely cut her off. He strode to the podium and, in a calm, devastatingly precise tone, laid out cold, hard evidence of financial mismanagement. He presented slides showing how charity funds, earmarked for underprivileged children, had been used to pay for the Maxwells' landscaping, their country club membership, and a lavish vacation to the south of France. The whispers in the grand ballroom turned into gasps, then to outraged murmurs. By the end of the night, Eleanor Maxwell was not only stripped of her position as chairwoman, she was the subject of a formal investigation. The Maxwell name wasn't just mud, it was poison. The final, most important blow was for Daisy. I compiled the entire unredacted file on the hit and run, the original suppressed police reports, new witness statements I'd spent years and millions tracking down, and the damning financial records of the payoffs. I leaked it all to a hungry, bulldog investigative journalist. A journalist I'd chosen for a very specific reason. The story, Justice Delayed, How the Maxwells Framed an Orphan to Save Their Son, went viral. It was a firestorm. Richard, now a smug, 38-year-old executive at what used to be his father's company, was arrested at his desk. The Maxwells, once a symbol of high society aspiration, became monsters overnight. I set up the final meeting in the one place they used to command absolute power, the main boardroom of Maxwell Industries. They were summoned by the new anonymous owner. When I walked in and took the seat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, the color drained from their faces. They didn't recognize me at first. I wasn't that scrawny, forgotten little girl anymore. I was a woman forged in fury and finance. "Mr. Maxwell, Mrs. Maxwell," I said, my voice perfectly calm, each word a carefully polished stone. "It's been a long time. I believe you know my sister, Daisy." In that moment, you could see the sequence of emotions flicker in their eyes. Confusion, then dawning recognition, then pure, undiluted terror. I laid it all out for them, not with anger, but with the cold precision of a surgeon. I explained how their biggest supplier was owned by a fund I controlled. I told them their personal banker had been feeding me information for 2 years. I told them that the journalist who broke the story was the son of the man Richard had crippled 20 years ago, a man I had found and whose family I now supported. Every single piece of their ruin was a direct, calculated echo of a past cruelty. I never raised my voice. I didn't have to. Their shattered empire, crashing down around them, was my exclamation point. With the truth finally exposed, Daisy was legally and publicly exonerated. I found her living a quiet life, working as a children's librarian in a small town in Oregon. The monsters had left deep scars, scars that may never fully fade, but for the first time in 2 decades, she was free. The Maxwells lost everything: their company, their reputation, their friends. Richard was sentenced to a long prison term. Their fortune was devoured by legal fees and restitution, with the remainder seized as part of the charity fraud case. The billions were never the point. They were never about being rich. They were a tool, a weapon. They were about having the power to bend the world back into a shape that resembled justice. It was a tool to buy back the life that was stolen from my sister. Today, that fortune is funding a new foundation in Daisy's name, the Daisy Chain Foundation, dedicated to providing elite legal and therapeutic resources for children who are abused, abandoned, or silenced by the very system designed to protect them. We're finally together again, healing in the quiet spaces between the memories. It's a slow process. Sometimes I see a flicker of the little girl she was in her smile. We're building a new future, one that isn't about vengeance anymore. It's about justice. And for the first time since we were children, it's about love. I turned a weapon of pure vengeance into an instrument for justice. The fortune that destroyed the Maxwells is now building a future for children they would have thrown away. But it leaves a question. Can an act born from such cold, calculated rage ever lead to true good? Or does destroying monsters just create a different kind? I want to know what you would have done. Let me know in the comments. If you were in Ivy's shoes, would you stop at justice or go all the way? Drop your answer in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that hit different.